Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 4. So, this week, what I want you to do is start thinking about the rhetorical appeals that we use to analyze the John Oliver episode from last week and how you can start applying those to the podcast or documentary that you've chosen to write about for your contextual analysis paper. So, that said, I have a couple of slideshows I want to share with you. I'm not going to go over them now because there is just a lot written down. And so, hopefully, it will be helpful to read through those. Um, but this one, for example, writing a rhetorical analysis, it's going to talk about how to write the thesis statement for your paper. It's going to be really important to pay attention to what I've included in the sort of thesis formula, because there are certain parts I'm going to be looking for when reading your papers, looking at those thesis statements. And so that's included here as a guide for you. And there's also some slides before that giving you some explanation of kind of why it's important. And then also, I've broken down a couple of different strategies for how you might organize the paper. So these are some outlines that you can follow. I'm going to give you some more information about these when we start talking about writing paragraphs next week, but this will hopefully give you some good insight to get you thinking about how you're going to structure the paper. And this should help you think too about how much notes you need to take for each of the rhetorical appeals. The other slideshow I'm sharing with you is general advice on the contextual analysis that's going to help you think about um, what kind of source you might want to choose, although, most of you have already chosen that. But also thinking about kind of the strategy and materials that you might need when you're actually composing the paper, right? And so hopefully this will be helpful for you. It's kind of like it's like a frequently asked questions slideshow. And then finally, we have our 2 assignments this week. The first one is a reflection. And so this is really just kind of, reflective writing. It's very casual, but I want you to talk about your experience with scams, or if you've heard of scams, if you know people who have been scammed, just basically any familiarity that you might have with scams, including if you've ever scammed, as long as you're not incriminating yourself. I'm just interested in it because I want to get a sense of where we're all coming from in relation to the class theme. And hopefully this can also help us think a little bit more about, you know, um, how these types of rhetoric, we're encountering them in everyday life. And finally, our final assignment of this week is supposed to help you get started on your paper. This is documentary and podcast notes, or podcast notes, I guess. And what I want you to do here is I want you to just watch or listen to the documentary or podcast that you're going to write about and take notes on the rhetorical appeals, just like we did for the John Oliver episode. And so if there's any rhetorical appeals that you're feeling a little shaky about, you're not totally sure, please feel free to check with me and say, like, does this seem like a good example of, and I'll tell you, the one that's most common is Kairos. It's probably the newest one. Maybe you haven't heard of it before, or it just doesn't really feel super familiar and easy to spot. Please reach out if you need any help identifying that. Um, and then you can either take a picture of these notes if you want to write them down in your notebook, or you can type them up. Just make sure that you have broken the list up into 4 groups, because the most important thing is making sure that you're kind of equally looking for each of the rhetorical appeals. You'll want to make sure that you have a good number of each of them in your paper, and that balance, like making sure you have plenty of pathos is going to be kind of, a little bit easier. But you want to make sure that you also have plenty of kairos and logos, which are a little harder to spot, but are just as important. And so please let me know if you have any questions about that. That's everything for this week. I'm going to go ahead and share some presentations with you, which is exciting. And I think that's everything. So have a great week. Let me know if you have any questions.